All right. Welcome, everybody. What's up, y'all? It's Dr. Paul. Welcome to the channel. Welcome to the show. Liberty Hill Comics and Comic Book Conservators, episode 44. Can you believe it? And we seem to be growing almost every week. We had a new record attendance in our last show, and hopefully we'll break it today.
Nice.
Because we have a special guest.
Woo woo! Hey, everybody.
We're welcoming Rick Morgan to the channel from Immaculate Comics, somebody for whom we've been anxious to get on for quite a while and who I've been watching for a long time. I have to say, Rick, we did a meeting this week just to prep for the show. Oh. And I told you it was kind of surreal to talk to you in your studio where I've been watching you for years now.
My domicile. Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's a little surreal for me whenever if I look back at what this used to look like years ago, and then I walk by it, I get that same sort of feeling.
Yeah. And I have my regular guest host, Shelby from Shelby's Comics, who is supplanted obviously by Jack.
Jack seems to like the camera.
You guys want to say, Shelby, let's start with you. Tell everybody hi. Tell them where they can find you.
Oh, hello, everyone. How are y'all doing tonight? Man, you can find me right here on the YouTubes. I was just noticing that I haven't dropped a video in about 2 months. I will be getting back to that, but we've been awful busy with trying to get this book out to y'all. But yeah, I can't. I'm so excited to have Rick here tonight. We've been friends for 4 years or so. And such, and just really excited. I'm more excited than a cat on a tuna boat.
There we go. That one was at least clean.
He's definitely Texan. Yeah.
He's Louisianan. Rick, why don't you say hi to everybody? Let them know where they can find you, and then we'll do deeper intros later.
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Rick Morgan, and I am the founder and owner and operator of Immaculate Comics at immaculatecomics.com, and here on YouTube on YouTube at Immaculate Comics.
Awesome. My regular co-hosts, Larry and Phil, are both coincidentally flying at this very moment. That's not very surprising because Larry flies aircraft for a living, but Phil ended up attending. Somebody help me with the name of it. Original.
It is Flora something. It is a original art con in Florida. A friend of mine, Southern Comic Geek, was telling me about it last week. I never looked it up. That is all I know about it. So yeah. Flora, I don't know, but it is in Florida. It's original comic art as far as I could understand.
Yeah, original art.
Sound did exciting and out of my price range.
Right. Phil's primary collecting passion these days is actually original art.
It is.
No surprise that he would be there, and his flight home happened to be right now. So it's just the three of us. As per usual, I'm going to crack an adult beverage. Ooh, that sounded good. And I got chastised before for drinking this out of a can. So just to avoid that, it's going in a pint glass. Now you can chastise me for how I poured it incorrectly. Kind of don't care. But it's all in fun anyway. So we have a great show for you.
We do, and I'll make a quick announcement because I haven't done a video on it. Tony NY, my buddy from up in New York.
That's Nyak.
This is Jack. Sadly, Freeway finally lost her battle with cancer a couple of weeks ago. And yeah, I miss her a lot. We were together for 16 years almost. And she'd been suffering with cancer for about 2 years. And finally, yeah. So Jack misses her too. But Jack did not become the alpha. That actually went to Charlie. So, but it was kind of funny to watch the cats battle for the alpha spot.
Well, our condolences.
You see the scratches on Jack's nose showing that he didn't win the alpha spot. So
He's like, that's all right. I'm still above Shelby on the totem pole.
that is true.
Our condolences, Shelby. I know that was difficult for you. So we have a great show in store in 3 parts. The first part is Rick's origin story. We love to do this when we have new guests on the show that haven't been on the show before. We just, in comic geek fashion, we do an origin story. And I got to work with you and see a little bit of this as we put it together, Rick. And I'm pumped to go through that with you and to share it with everybody. And then the B segment is going to be about this thing right here, the book, which has only 5 days left before the Kickstarter's over. And we want to make sure people understand that they can still get in on it, but that they don't have much time left. And we're going to actually preview some things we haven't showed you yet. So you're going to get a sneak preview of some of the content. And lastly, we're going to wrap up with a segment on a project that Rick is especially proud of, that I think everybody's really going to enjoy. Throughout, we're going to have Q&A, and tonight we're just all about repping Rick's work in the community and how much he's contributed and how much we appreciate everything he's done and continues to do. And not for nothing, but Rick was on the very short list of people that I told Shelby when we started writing the book, we really needed to get as a reviewer of the book.
Yes, not short bus, short list.
Somebody whose opinion I really value and appreciate, and who I really wanted feedback from on the book. So he was one of our very early readers before very many other people were, before we were comfortable showing the content to anybody else. So thank you for that, Rick. And also also generously contributed images and other information to the book as well. So we certainly appreciate that. So why don't we get through some hellos, then we'll jump into the A segment. Before we do the shout outs, I want to say thank you to Dibby's Takeout and Salesboy Comics. They are, if you're watching this show live and it's ad free, it's because they did a super chat last episode and they're sponsoring this episode. So everybody give them a shout out. While you're at it, please give the episode a thumbs up, and we'll
go check out Salesboy's YouTube channel. He's dropped a few videos. He's doing some really good. Thank you, Jack. Jack's moving my mouse over here. Y'all moved on me. Yeah, he's doing some really cool I'm going to say early work, and I love seeing it. I love seeing new people come into this hobby of ours of conservation, and he's doing some great stuff over there.
And for sure, a fun and innovative take. So yeah.
Oh, for sure.
So let's say hi to some folks. Fierce Rabbit is joining us.
Start out with Fierce Rabbit.
Say again?
I said start out with Fierce Rabbit. He's been waiting on us. He says this is like the ALCS for him. And he also commented down below that he checked out the Kickstarter and wants to hear more about it. So if you have any other questions, please just throw them out and we'll be happy to try and answer. And of course, like Paul said, we got a B segment coming up. I'll be giving some updates.
Awesome. In addition to Fierce Rabbit, Rick Nestor's joined us. Welcome, Rick. My buddy Hugo Danner. Mike, what's up? Jason Pinkney, welcome to the show, Rick, he says. Don Carter, as usual, is here. Pluck my last nerve as a regular. The Professor, Peter Olachi, check out his channel, Experiments in Conservation. Silver Spidey, Don Carter.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, some of those are coming from my channel. Tony, I think Silver Spidey, I'm not sure. But yeah, a few of them.
Yeah, we're simulcasting on Rick's channel and Shelby's channel. So welcome everybody. It may even be that Larry adds us to Flying Owl at some point. Tony NY Jr. is here from Shelby's, I believe.
Yep.
Peter says, hi, Rick. Hi, Shelby. The Archivist Adrift, Jason says, hi, all. Check out his channel here on YouTube. Old School Diesel Dude is joining us by simulcast as Vulu's here. And Ben Stewart, if I haven't mentioned you yet, Kate and Lube says Immaculate Comics is absolute 3 fire emojis. Collecting Chaos. I remember to turn this on before the end. SP Card Fan is here. And let's see. Who else do we have? I think that's it. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Glad to have you here. Like I said, this show I've been looking forward to for a long time. Surreal for me. Hard to imagine when I was watching Rick's channel 3 years ago that 3 years in the future, I'd be hosting him here on our channel and he'd be helping us launch our book. Really, the way life twists and turns is incredible. I guess just kind of try to help people, try to do the right thing, hang out, be open to opportunities, be humble, and stuff like this comes to you. So I'm excited. Unless there's anything else either of you want to say, I think we should jump into Rick's origin story in our A segment.
I'm ready.
That's good.
So this should be fun. I'm on the wrong slide. Sorry about that. I'll fix that. I'm the only MC because Phil is our other admin person and he's not here today. So Rick, take it away, man. Just let me know when you want to go next slide.
Sure.
But I just want to say you were a handsome, you were cute.
Thanks.
Good looking young feller.
Well, I wanted to give some context because instead of just story. So I did start collecting comics in 1979. I still have the first Spider-Man book I bought. It was like what I consider myself collecting. I do have 2 videos. I have a video on the 70s and a video on the 80s on my channel. And I'm halfway through making the one in the 90s. They're very complicated and long to make. It take me about 2 years each to make these videos. They're about 6 to 10 seconds in another country or something every time. So it takes a while to like capture all that. But I will say I started reading comics, as most people did as a young child. And I started with Legion of Superheroes, with Superboy Legion of Superheroes, DC comic.
Mm-hmm.
I did that because it was sold in these little like Reader's
Digests,
like, little in the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
And for the money, you got 10 times as many superheroes as a single book, and there's a lot of stories in there, but it was like they were miniaturized. But sadly, in 1979, the Superman the movie then came out in 1978.
Mm-hmm.
And in early 1979, it had stopped being released, and it was coming out again in the spring. And my dad said he was going to take me to see this movie, but he died. He died in a car accident before he could take me. And I couldn't bring myself to read anymore. Every time I read a Superman story, it reminded me, right?
Sure.
So I just couldn't. And then he shows up at the time he was in guest starring, or there was a super dog or a girl or their super cousin or super monkey in every book.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
You couldn't not be exposed to it. So I went away
on the DC side for sure. Yeah.
Altogether. And in fact, no comics. I just couldn't stomach it. I just had to stay away. So then I started collecting Star Wars guys because whenever I went to my friend's house, there's only 2 things we were doing. It was either Hot Wheels cars or Star Wars guys. That was the only things we played anywhere, right? And so
it's funny too, Rick. Sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
it's funny that you call them Star Wars guys because that's exactly what my brother and I and all of our friends called them. We all called them Star Wars guys. That's what you collected, and that's what you carried around in your pocket and played with.
That's what we called it, playing Star Wars guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we'd set up like my taking like gluing those ghost turds to some cardboard and making Hoth pits. That was later, and had lots of Tatooine scenes, and we would set
Dagobah. Yeah, we had a makeshift Dagobah that we made out of like a little burnt up stump. Yeah.
Oh, totally. And we would set the guys up, and we'd stand away and try to throw rocks and hit the other guys' figures down to like.
Yep. We were a little more advanced than that. We had a game where you would set up all your Star Wars guys across, like down the hall or across the room, and then we would shoot marbles.
Oh.
and
is
try
better.
to knock them down. And we had like a point system, and you would make them in like a triangle to protect like a main Star Wars figure. And if that figure got knocked down, then you lost, right? So we did this very similar but slightly different games.
Yeah, we've had parallel paths, I think. But those I could only get for a long time stormtroopers and Jawas. That was it. Like there was very little. Like if you went to the store, nothing else was available in 1978. But if you wanted something, what I would do is I would take a magnifying glass and burn the stormtroopers and trade them to my friends as like battle damage. And I would do stuff to the Jawas and wrap them in aluminum foil and say this is like an armored Jawa. And I was like this guy who was like the guy who's opened up his lunchbox and out there wheeling and dealing for Star Wars figures, which is what I really wanted. And I never got them. I never got comic books. And the things I asked for, my grandma said, "Oh, you're wasting your time on that stuff." They bought me other things. They took a moral high ground, and that this was just wasting my brain. So about this time, I spent the night at my friend's house. His name was Peter, and his brother had gone into the army, and he had a bunch of old FF Hulk and Spider-Man books in his brother's room, because I slept in his brother's room when we spent the night. And he said, "Oh yeah, your brother said," he said, "you can have any of that stuff if anybody comes over here." I didn't want it, but you can have it. And I read several Spider-Man books.
Wow.
And can we go to the next slide now, maybe?
Yeah.
Let's go. So these are the Star Wars guys I still have. These are the ones I have traded for over the years. I've got an Obi-Wan in the back. This is my Millennium Falcon. Couple of, you can see well-loved Lukes here.
Sure.
Everything else, the joints were all loose and falling off, but these are the ones that I had saved from the 70s and early 80s. Those awesome. I still have them, and I've never given them up.
We also didn't have very many. I still have all of mine original, but I went on a kick in the late 90s, early 2000s where I bought all the ones I couldn't afford when I was a kid. So now I have the Darth Vader carry case,
one right in the other room right now.
I have 3 of those full. I don't have every one from the original, like 156 originally released, but I got most of them.
Yeah, it was a big deal for me.
We can trade actually for doubles if you want, Rick. Let me know.
Yeah, maybe this is literally all I have. I never bought any more. These were all about $3 each when I got them.
Yeah, sure.
All right, next slide for this, and then so on the left here, this is that first book I ever read. It was about 3 years old at the time. This was under my friend Peter's brother's bed in a box, and I still have it.
Awesome.
But the time that I was reading the books, the first book I bought was this one here on the right. And I still have that book. This is a book that I bought. Now you notice a little line through there. This was at a drugstore. I don't remember the name of the drugstore. I think Kunstler's or something like that. I used to ride my bike up there. It used to be like the malt shops. It had the spinning seats and stuff.
Oh yeah.
In the back of the malt shop, they used to have these wooden counters with glass on top, and I think they had like cigars or candy or something in the old days. But the owner, I assume the owner of this shop, I don't really know, had put he was like wheeling and dealing in comic books, and what else was he trading? There was something else like he was getting from us and selling and buying, and so he had put some comics out. So he would encourage us to come back and trade comics we purchased for him, and he would take 4 or 5 of them, and then he would give us a new one or something else that we didn't have. But he would admonish us: quit rolling these up and sticking them in your back pocket. Quit spilling grape Nihon. It's the first time I'd ever heard that it was something that you
take better care. Yeah,
exactly. So here's
you're gonna have to trade me 6 to 1.
Exactly. Yeah. So he'd come at us and he was like, "Come on, you guys, you got to be good about this." And so he said to me in particular, he said, "Okay," like he called me Ricky at the time. Ricky, go get your comic books and bring them back. And when I came back, what I had done was I had some FF books, and I had glued these red rocks to the cover from my grandma's yard. Sure. And I had taken some of her like pantyhose and cut them up and made webbing on the cover from this, because I thought I was modifying them the way I modified these Star Wars guys.
Right.
And I thought these were going to be great. I'm going to add so much value. I came back to him and he completely flipped out. Like, he was like, "What are you doing? Who glues rocks to comic books? Like, you don't do this, right?" So I had a lot of aligning to do. But he took me in the back and he showed me where he had a big table, and he had encyclopedias and an iron and a rubber eraser, and he said, "Look, here's what you do. Get the
What?
white areas, not the color areas." He's like showing me how to clean up these books. And this was probably
Wow.
1980 or so, a very long time ago. He's like, "You don't want
Wow.
these encyclopedias, but you don't want there to be the print," because the encyclopedia had like a pattern in the cover that could be
It
transferred.
was
So you put
like leather grain cover.
something like that. Yeah, it was like a herringbone or something like that. And so he would put this like a brown paper, I don't know what it was, like between them and stack them up. And so this was early days, but he was teaching me what to do, right? And he had some
He was cleaning and pressing in 1980.
yes, he was. And he
Wow.
also had like acetone because he was in a drugstore, right? And he was using it with Q-tips to take ink off of books and things like this. And he was putting them back out and he was selling them like an LCS, but not an LCS. It was
Yeah.
really just a
Back
drugstore.
issues. Back issues.
Yeah,
Well,
he was saving them
here-
instead of sending him in, turning him in.
To your point, this book on the right, this diamond pattern with the bar through the UPC, that's actually a very early direct edition book.
Yeah, and so he was like,
So this
like
was
LCS.
not intended for newsstands. So this would not have come to him through his normal distribution channel.
Yeah, it's interesting how he had this, but almost all the books I bought from him directly, which was only until I think 210, have this same thing. So he got them somehow in
He was
some way.
buying them from somebody. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was trying to make a nickel at a time however he could, right? He was doing what he could.
They add
And it
up.
was other stuff too. He had other things. Like he was just wheeling and dealing and all kinds of stuff, you know. So he was just that guy. He was always making money. And he was
That's fun.
he was a Greek guy, I remember.
Sure.
So next slide, please. So this is the sort. This is the location of the store. So this was about this photo is the only one I could find. It's about 15 years before I was there. This is probably the mid 60s. But this is the spot, and this is Monrovia, California. There's another picture of the same building from the 30s in the same street. And today, that same mountain, it's all burnt now, unfortunately. But this building is still there.
Unless there happened to be literally no one buying a new car ever, I think this picture is more like mid 50s.
Yeah, maybe it is.
I see cars from the 40s and early 50s here. I don't see a single car past 55 here.
Yeah, I don't actually know the date. So the building. I grabbed this one because this is what it looked like in my memory. In fact, I remember the lamppost, in fact.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's what I rode my bike here and would lean it up on this lamppost. I used to sit on that corner and there was actually a burrito stand around the corner. I get a burrito and a grape knee-high and I sit there and read comic books like literally on this corner as a kid.
Wow.
Yeah. And all right, next slide, please.
I just want to take this in.
Yeah. So then as I grew older, I moved to Oregon. And I started to, I found an actual comic book store, something I didn't know existed. This is what I looked like back then. I got a Spider-Man, old and new. This is Black Suit days. I was probably like in 8th grade, maybe here.
Mm-hmm.
This was a time that I lived in I went from Los Angeles area in California to a tiny town with just a few hundred people in it in Oregon. Very different place. There's no way to buy even food, really. We didn't have much for restaurants, just a couple of like fast food places. And somebody heard I was collecting comic books. Actually, I worked on a farm. I was like bucking hay and moving pipe and stuff. And the owner of the farm said, "Hey, well, a guy used to work for me. There's a comic book store in Eugene, Oregon, is where it was." And I was like, "What? They have stores with just comic books? I didn't even know." Right? I was like, "Oh." But it was about 25 miles away from where I live. And next slide, please.
Yep. This is very similar to, I grew up in a very rural environment where, again, there were no restaurants within 15 miles of my house. And we also had no comic book shop until we had 5, right? Because until that boom happened, and then they were everywhere.
Yeah. We didn't even have phones until like the early 80s because there was a siren in our town that would go off and all the guys who were the volunteer police and firemen would have to drive to the fire station and the police station when they heard the air raid sign to see which one of them was needed.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like,
okay, I don't know about not having phones, bro.
Yeah.
We did have a party line phone where we shared a phone line with a couple other families.
Yeah,
we had different rings. Like you would only answer the phone if it was your specific ring.
Oh, I do remember that too. I do remember picking up the phone and having somebody say like, your cow's in our yard again. And I'm like, my cow is not in your yard. Stuff like that, those kind of conversations. But that's when we first got them. They were like a little bit before my time they got them, but we were still doing that siren because not everybody had phones in that town. But this is my friend I would go get comic books with on the right here. His name is Jeff. And last year I went with him to the same comic book store. It's what we look like today. And we used to ride our bikes. It was 25 miles. And we would drive up like a long country road. We'd have to pack sandwiches and go into town. And it was a huge effort. And all my math was in at first 60 cents, and then it was 75 cents. Like I knew that 225 was 3 comic books and $3 was 4 comic books. And I'd have to take cardboard and cut it and duct tape it, fold it in half and jam it in my coat so I wouldn't wrinkle them on the way home. And I'm riding and it's like pouring rain on me and turn my face sideways. This is before I even this is actually still before comic book bags for me.
Because at the time, you would look at the cost of 100 comic bags would be $3, so they're 3 cents a piece, and you'd be like, "That's too much." Like with $3, I could buy 5 comics, right? When they're 60 cents.
Exactly the math.
I'm not going to buy 100 bags when I could buy 5 comics for that amount of money, right?
Yeah,
100%. Everything you're saying is completely resonating with me.
Oh, I'm so glad.
So what we used to do was go and you remember produce bags used to be on a big spiral. We would steal produce bags and use as comic bags, right? And stick our comics in the produce bags and fold them over.
Any kind of bag you could find. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And speaking of the 60 cents, when we started 60 cents, 50 cents technically, but very, very soon after I started collecting, they were 60. And in Michigan, we had the 10-cent deposit on all the cans and bottles. So for us, that math was, if I can find 6 bottles or cans, I can return them, get 10 cents a piece for them. That's a comic book. So it became like a daily adventure to leave the house in the morning and wander around parks and whatever, empty lots, wherever people would just throw trash and find 6 cans or bottles and then head to the 7-Eleven and exchange them for a comic book. That's what my brother and I did during the summers.
Yeah, that's exactly that. I do the same thing. It was 5 cents a can, 10 cents for a bottle, and the 8 packs. The Coke came in the 8 packs. I had no intention of saving the books, preserving them to sell them later. I wanted to save them up to trade them back in to get more, which was, and I knew from experience that better books traded for more because there was no like other way to get them or other way to read them besides going to the comic book store. Once a year at the Red Lion, there was a small convention, comic book convention, but otherwise there was nothing. Like if the comic book store didn't have it, I didn't even know what the cover of many of these books looked like because there was no exposure to this whatsoever. They did give me a little 3x5 card checklist. You write the title of your book at the top. At the time, I don't think any comic had hit even 300 yet issues. So they'd have like you check off the ones you have. That was how you could read the whole story. I remember thinking I want to read all the Spider-Man books, but I couldn't bring myself to trade any of my Spider-Man books in. They were like beloved, right? So I would reading other stuff, and those were the ones I would trade and get these back issues at the time. And so the idea of condition was only so I could get rid of it to trade more. And there was a guy who'd one of the comic book store people would get. He had access to polypro bags. They're all yellowed and gross, and they were much thicker in these days. And he would sell the used bags. So they would sell the bags off the books that people brought in, and he would have a box. He'd say, "Hey, you want any used bags? How much are they?" Well, they're 5 cents instead of 10. Like, whoa, that's a pretty good deal. So here I am jamming these comics in these used they bags. Were so bad too. They were like not the same quality as today, wrinkly and stuff. Yeah. And so
wow,
what I would do, that was just for transporting. That was just to get him home, not wet if it was pouring rain on me, Okay, next slide, please.
That's amazing.
So this is what the front of that comic book store was now. Inside behind that door, which is my friend Nolan's head, is the stairs that went upstairs. So the upper half of this building was half of a record store that smelled like marijuana all the time. And the other half was a comic book store that smelled much better on the other side. So this image you see on the right here is the parking underneath this building in Eugene. And it still says Book Lift here because there was a small pulley system with a rope that they had built so you could put all your comics into this thing, and then you could go upstairs, or you could pull on the rope and that guy would pull them upstairs because too many people were dropping them and they couldn't make it up the windy. It was like several floors up.
Wow.
So there's that book lift is still there, even though that comic book store has probably been closed for 30 years. It's still
imagine receiving from people so many back issue comic books that they were throwing them in this lift and you were lifting them up that way.
That you built it for this purpose.
Incredible.
Lift, and the lift is still there. I don't think I've ever sold a comic in my life to this day. I've given away many. I've traded some. I don't think I've ever sold one. So I've never used it this way, but I have bought enough comics that it made sense for them to lower the lift on me.
Wow.
Later in my life, because I just voraciously read it. In fact, I have still the first Spider-Man book I ever received in a mail subscription, wrapped in brown paper. I have it in a box behind me, and it's never seen daylight.
Yeah,
I still have it.
I was in that situation until recently. In fact, I used to jokingly, when people would ask me about selling comics, I would just stare at them for a while, and then I would say, I don't understand the question, right? Because I just never sold anything. But, you know, we're both, well, I'm over a half century old now.
I'm 53, yeah.
Yeah, we're essentially the same age. And my kids have no interest. And I really don't want to leave them with a big burden to deal with. So I've just started, literally in the last year, I've just started kind of paring the collection, just the barest amounts of paring the collection down and starting to consolidate into the things that are most important to me and making them easy for my heirs to flip after I leave the mortal coil, so that it's not a burden on them. But
yeah,
I share your... I understand certainly what you're talking about, because up until very recently, definitely all the books that I bought when I was that age, I still have.
And by the way, I'm the oldest of the three of us.
Really? You look younger.
Baby faced, I know, right? Rick and I have to do a who wore it better.
I know which one of us is which, right?
Oh, speaking of Rick, well, we'll do it in the break between the segments. Please go ahead.
Sure. So this was a great time for me, and this is when I was absorbing all of this material. But I will tell you that comic books were changing as I changed. I grew up at the right exact moment, because
all of us did, yeah.
Dark Knight, Daredevil, all of these books were becoming. So Moon Knight came out. Moon Knight was only sold in comic shops, and it had a letter in the back of one of them that said, "Hey, what should we be doing here? We don't know what to do to people who don't buy these in a grocery store," right? And so it was growing up and it was maturing.
Sure.
And the books, and I was growing older too, and watching these stories. Craven's Last Hunt was coming out towards the Venom came out. I remember this I got 12 copies of ASM 300 when it came out.
You still got all 12?
I do. And I've only read one. So that was like, because we heard something was going to happen. We didn't know what, right? Everybody was saying. Sure. So I just bought a bunch. So it was very interesting how the medium was changing. X-Men, the Claremont, it changed everything, right? Because that was the first time people took these as like serious literature. And then we had the Watchmen came out, and the Walt Simonson Thor was coming out. And then everything got upended in the early 90s, because we had like Jim Lee and Eric Larson, and these guys broke off and started. They took the talent elsewhere, and just everything shattered. And DC their reaction was to kill Superman. So it was like everything was just going bonkers. And I was there to witness all of this and to see all this happen from the really kind of hokey, dumb stories we were getting in the late 70s. And it was really, really good. I was so grateful to be able to watch this happen and to observe it and to save those books up, because now I have these extra special memories that I think we all think they're special memories, because they feed so much of the media we digest today, the movies and the other retroactive, what they call retconning stories and changing things around. But I saw it the first time when like before it was a cliche that superheroes died and came back. I was watching them die and freaking out, right? I actually was in a car accident. I broke my foot, and I was in the hospital And I had my boss, I worked in this farm and I broke my foot in a car accident. And I said, you got to go to the comic book store for me. And he got me my Craven's Last Hunt book and brought it to me so I could read it.
Wow.
So I wanted to just,
There's a picture of you with your cast.
Yeah, that's the cast from my foot break. And I got a Spider-Man shirt on. So this is just to demonstrate that I was always collecting. Like my room was a pigsty, but I got I still have that black cat coaster. In fact, it's to my left right now. And I have all these books here and and
blue and red Spidey phone.
Yeah. Actually, it was 2 phones that I made, right? From that. And I got this is the Batman. That's a Shadow of the Bat cover that was with as a promotional for
and of course you got to have the Madonna poster.
That's Madonna, and a calendar and all kinds of whatever I could find, limited stuff to collect at the time, but I had it. So years and years, I'm like never gave up on it, which many, or I'm going to say all of my friends did.
Yeah,
for reading comics. I was like the one holdout that was hanging in there. I got to meet Stan Lee 3 times. I had him sign many of my comics. One time I went, there was nobody even wanted to talk to him.
Wow.
There was nobody in line, and he was eating a meatball sub from Subway, and I gave him a comic, and I'll never forget, he had meatball sauce on his hands, and I'm sweating bullets because I'm like, is Stan Lee gonna wipe tomato sauce on my book? I'm like, but I didn't want to say anything to him because I was like so dumbfounded. My heart was pounding. I'm like, is he just gonna grab this thing and wipe
the provenance? Is this is meatball sauce from Stan Lee?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then at the time, I only had him sign things on the inside because it was like, you didn't want him to mess up the cover like he was.
Of course. I still prefer that, by the way.
For grading, you kind of have to have an outside for people to see it. But I'm with you on that. I actually talked to him about Amazing Spider-Man #3 that has a panel when Doc Ock first meets, this first appearance of Doc Ock, meets Spider-Man. He says, and now Superman. And so I mentioned it to him, and he said, he wrote in my book, it's a good thing DC's lawyers were out of town that week. He said, and he wrote that and he put Stan on it. And we visited for, I don't know, 5 minutes or something.
Sure.
And I got a letter printed in a Spider-Man book. This was high times for me.
The professor wants to know which book is your letters in.
It's not until later, but it's Sensational Spider-Man 16 with the Prowler and the short-lived Sensational run.
Cool.
Yeah. All right, next slide, please. So I got a job in the late 80s, early 90s for 3 summers because I had other jobs too at a paper mill. This is the paper mill in the upper right. This is in one of my videos. This was how I started. Now I would always been still doing the eraser and the encyclopedia stuff, right? I didn't know there was more than this, but I got a job in a laboratory at a paper mill called Weyerhaeuser in Albany. And what I did was test paper, right? I saw paper get made. I saw what the differences in the pH did. I saw the different bleaching agents. I learned about lignin and cellulose and hemicellulose and oxidation and acid buildup and paper aging and deacidity. All this stuff I learned. And I sat there with a little punch and punched out paper to test for its strength. And I would blend it in a blender and check its pH. And I was learning all this stuff. And you can imagine I was sneaking comic books in there. And I was taking comic books apart, old ones versus new ones, checking the paper strength, checking the ink bleed, checking the rosin to see if it had, a lot of them have sulfates or sulfites in them, and hence they degrade into sulfuric acid and lactic acid and malic acid and all these things that we could put into a chromatograph, and we could, with a GC, we could see which acids were building up on the paper, how to best neutralize it. And I was like 18, 19, but learning a lot, and my wheels were spinning through the frameworks, as you can imagine, of comic books, right?
Yeah.
Watching them strip ink like right off of paper and like watching them wash paper with different surfactants and things too. And I'm like, my brain was just, you can imagine it was spinning up, right?
This is gold. Yeah,
it was a nice confluence of interest for me. And the guys that were there, the older guys, I'll never forget, his name was Tom Farmer. He's a raging alcoholic. And I used to commute with him because I lived in Salem. This was in Albany. And he used to stop and pull over and have me throw bottles of whiskey over the fence. And they would land in the grass on the other side. So during the day, he could go out and drink and like collapse in the grass and just fall asleep drunk. And that's when I would go and test all my comic books. It's a real story, but it really happened.
Wow.
Yeah. All right. Next slide, please. And then later, after I got out of this, I got my undergraduate degree in chemistry and decided I wanted to be a consultant. I was running around mostly California, Oregon, Washington, like teaching people how to do electroplating and lean systems and metal deposition and all this stuff. I would just want to do it, but I still wore, here's me with a Spider-Man shirt on, embroidered Spider-Man shirt, teaching a class of people how to make circuit boards. I'm still just running around doing this kind of stuff, even through the mid 90s. And
this is photochemical etching.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, for circuit boards. Yeah, I've done that.
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah. And this is when I finished my ASM collection. I got all the ASM, all the Marvel Team Up, all the Spectacular Spider-Man, and all of the Web of Spider-Man completed in the mid 90s. And I've been done. I got AF-15 later. I finished my goal of from 15 years, which seemed like a long time earlier, of getting all the Spider-Man comics finally, right?
Yeah,
and still no internet.
Remarkable achievement.
Still, this is like having to like call people on the phone who, if they were in the price guide, and like meet people and like begging and stealing and like just like not stealing.
Before the internet, it was
a struggle.
Very difficult.
Yeah,
any grade is better than no grade.
And you mail them a check, and then you'd have to wait, and then it's
yeah. All right, next slide, please. So later, I started looking at some of the comics I'd had, and I was this group of people who were taking the bags off of books and replacing the bags and the boards, and noticing books that I remember looking at these, because now it's been 20 years.
Yep.
Right? And I'm like, these don't look so good anymore.
Yep.
And I can smell it. So I started looking at trying to find commercial surfactants to clean comic books well with. And I tried them for a long time. I tried different ones, and I had access to a lot of them. I got trained as a formulations chemist to make surfactants and detergents, and I learned a lot about it. And I learned that most things are meant to clean. If you want to sell it, you want broad appeal. So you want it to clean as many things as possible. I won't get too technical, but the stuff you want to clean comic books is as narrow as possible. And it's not the same, right? Because you can easily strip the rosin, the ink, the sizing. You could do all kinds of stuff, but you only want to take the things that are related to the most common soil on, which is finger oil degradation oxidized by oxygen in the air. It's the most common, and in common household grime and dirt, right? It's water soluble anyway. So that just water or peroxide would clean that. I don't recommend the water peroxide, but just water would clean. A lot of it would come off that way. Otherwise, you need something with as narrow as a hydrophilic, lipophilic boundary you can get, that's targeted right at sebum for washing your hands,
Right.
And so I had to make it. What ends up being kind of easy, it takes sugar and potassium hydroxide, and you have to crack it and boil it, but it takes about a month to make a gallon of the stuff, because you have to sit there and slowly get the fractions and put them back in until you get narrower fractions. I have an FTIR, so I can get the spectrum, and I know when I'm done, when it's been purified, and I finally made something that worked for me. And I started making other stuff too, because I was getting good at industrial manufacturing procedures, and I started to figure out what it was I needed to make and do things. Again, I'm working in a bubble. There's no, as far as I know, there's no one I'm talking to. I haven't any friends, and I'm only doing this for myself, for my own books. And sometimes I'd go to comic book stores when I got to a new one, because I knew my guy at my place was like, I don't know, man, you're crazy. He thought I was a crazy scientist.
Sure.
Next slide, please. I don't remember what's coming up here in these. So I started doing different things and trying different stuff. And I did like an early, like in the teens, early like 2010s to late 20 teens. I would take paper, but I would non-sized paper, just raw like cellulose, and soak some acetone in it, or actually I would toluene's better. And I would put it and press it over ink. Like this is a copy of Justice League #1, where a guy named Bill Hames written his name. This is one of my earlier videos that still exists, because I
remember watching this. Yeah.
My first several dozen I had to take off, because they had like music that before I got monetized, like I couldn't have them anymore. So they're not publicly available, but I transferred and was able to pull this off. This guy, Bill Hames, contacted me.
Incredible.
And so yeah, he found me later, and he said, "Hey, where did you get this book?" And I said, well, I got this book in Eugene, Oregon. He goes, I'm from and still live in Harrisburg, Oregon, about 15 miles north of Eugene. And he goes, somebody told me that you've got my book, and I have his book to this day. Yeah. So that was quite an interesting story.
Did you meet up with him and have him sign the book?
No, I asked him if he wanted it back or what do you like? What's talking? He says, nah, I don't care. He said, and then I never heard from him again. But he just wanted to say hi, I guess. So it was pretty cool. I mean, that was really cool. Something that I'm pretty sure as a child he never imagined happening in the 60s. You know, right. I think this is from 1960 too. Absolutely. You know, or something like that. Yeah. So he wrote his name in it. He said, well, he goes, it worked. The book, I found the book years later, writing your name in it does work. You know? So I started making YouTube videos in like 2019. I had like 6 followers for like the longest time. Like nobody was watching my videos. I made them kind of to preserve them for myself, but also because I started searching how to clean comic books, how to press comic books. And there was some information out there even at the time, but it was really gate kept. And like the people didn't share information very easily.
Sure.
There were some people who felt like any kind of cleaning and pressing was they just didn't like it, and they let me know about it like pretty vociferously, right? And I lived in my own bubble. I didn't really communicate with anybody. I just shared stuff. I didn't look back, and the next thing I knew, I had like a couple thousand followers, like out of nowhere. I was like, oh, there's people watching this stuff. And then people started to ask me, hey, where do you get that cleaner? What is that cleaner? I'm like, well, you don't get it. I make it. It seems improbable, right? And then they slowly bring me the things that they would like to see. Like today, actually, I 3D printed a new Immaculate holder, but it's nice. It's nice because this one actually makes the ball turn while you're turning.
Hold on just a second. I'm going to feature you and you can show everybody that again.
Oh yeah, I'll show you. So here's the original one, right? It looks like this. It's just a place to hold a ball so it doesn't roll off the table, because it was a headache. And someone said, hey, why don't you make these balls don't roll off the table when we're getting the wrinkles out of our book? I said, okay, I did this. But I said, you can also use this as a tool to
roll the ball.
To roll it. But it makes a little dent because you're pushing it through the wrinkles. And it's not ideal. But now, after lots of trial and trying with getting the right filament size and step slicing of it's this size for this Immaculate, now I've run some black lines to help me track this. Now it rolls. So now the ball rolls with it. And so now it doesn't leave the dent in the book.
So the other one was it was gliding across the paper. Now it rolls.
Right. It worked.
Oh, wow.
But it was not ideal, because then you have to press it again. The other thing was, now I'm bending my Tic-Tac boards. I'm like, I've built a die, so these ones are smooth edges. So the Tic-Tac boards are paper because they're easier to form in a press. I've tried forming these things and cutting them. The plastic, this is lucite, but it burns and it makes streaks and it doesn't. But this one now I've got a heater. I put them in an oven and I put a die and I force it into the mold. So now it has an edge. Now it has a smooth edge that is exactly the same angle of natural comic book lay. I had to cut out for the staple area,
of course,
in there. So these are new things. So I'm constantly doing this, and this comes from community. It comes from people asking me stuff. And then, so
I asked you to build something. I said, could you do this? Could you take one of your things and do it this way so that I could do this? And you said, sure can, and whipped it out.
Yeah,
I haven't put it in a video yet, but in the future we'll get around to that.
I love it. That warms my heart, and Shelby has too. He's got one.
So I have my special created. So one thing is, Rick created these Immaculate dryers. So you would take a comic that you've wet cleaned and press it between two of these, and he has like legs and screws. So that way you can prevent shrinking of your comic, because if you ever wet cleaned a Silver Age book, you know that they are prone to shrinking either left, right, or top to bottom. But since I pull mine out in Hollytex, the Hollytex, hung over, and I didn't, trying to move, wet paper is weak paper, as we all now say because of Rick. It's hard to transport it over to a smaller sheet of Hollytex. So what I did is I just asked Rick, I said, can you cut me something that's thicker? So what I do is, and you've seen my videos, is I have a piece of paper towel, the Hollytex and the Hollytex sandwich with the comic wrap or cover in between it, then another paper towel, and I just lay these on top of each other. I find that it reduces my drying time quite a bit, no shrinkage. And Rick has even started using this, I saw, for full immersion wet cleaning. So if you have a very brittle or soft book and you want more support, you can actually lay this in the bottom of your tray, lay your Hollytex comic sandwich on it, just simply lift it out. You can blotter the top and then put a fresh blotter on. And then what I do is I just lay my other sheet, flip it over, take off, and then I blotter the other side and put a piece and lay it back on top and put a weight. So, yeah, if you're ever concerned about lifting very weak paper out of your tray, definitely I would suggest these two. And Rick has a video on it, and it works really well. So,
Shelby,
yeah.
can you show them how that's keyed so that you get the holes to line up? Because you can't see the holes if the book's on it. So there are little cutouts on the top and bottom.
There are, yeah.
So
there's a little.
So those are to help you get the holes aligned properly. Yeah. So when those are lined up, and then the holes are lined up.
Yeah. Then your holes are lined
if you're in the books on it. So that's
versus, yeah. You notice, see the holes doesn't. Well, they do there, but if I turn it upside down, there you go. Now the holes don't line up.
Exactly.
But really ingenious little things that Rick did with these products. And like I said, y'all see them all the time. Also, I have an affiliate link. So, doesn't cost you anything extra, but it helps me out. I know Rick will be talking about it. Here's my original bottle of a
That's an old school bottle. Yeah.
This is, and I bought this probably 4 years ago, I think. And I still have and you don't even sell them in the large bottles anymore, but I still have my large bottle, and it's got about this much left in it. So I'm going to have to talk to you about it.
Yeah, of course.
And of course, probably Rick's claim to fame, and this is a prototype. Mine actually still has some little imperfections in the tip, and I know you've improved this tip, but the flawless staple remover, and this was before you even made the label. So I have a prototype of the capable staple tool here. So yeah, as soon as Rick put this out, this was also a prototype that I got from Rick. If you do any humidification, which these are great for humidification too, if you want to make sure that moisture comes up through the book and evenly saturates your book, and then you can put this and lay your book across it, and you get really good even distribution of moisture during your humidification process. So
the new one has holes in it that match the pattern in there.
Yes. So this was a prototype also, and then like Rick said, now it has holes. Thank you, Jack. And one thing I've shared a little bit is I keep a bottle of ImmacuClean with calcium hydroxide, and because I will say this, as someone that has used ImmacuClean for 4 years, it is a learning process of wetting your cotton round and wiping, and sometimes you get streakage and things like that, which is all a learning process of working that. But I have found that I can spray this onto after I dry clean something and prior to wet cleaning, I can spray this on there and let it sit for a few minutes, and it'll help break down those oils. And then when I move it, and don't pick on the way I say oils, and then move it over to the tray of calcium hydroxide solution, and it just comes up. It's really amazing. So I'm a huge advocate of Rick's products, and that is my spiel. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. John Popico, Big John, puts it in his steamer and steams the books with the stuff.
I've done the hop method with it.
Oh, have you really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've done hop with it.
I think that actually is probably a good segue to this slide.
Yeah, that's it. So now I founded with my wife, who's saved me from financial ruin on it so many times, Heather. Thank you, dear Heather, because I don't really pay attention to the things I should be paying attention to. But now we have 7,677 as of this morning registered customers, and the average person who reorders makes 4.5 orders a piece, and so it's very popular store. It keeps us very. I keep saying this is the last month because how many people out there are collecting comic books and cleaning them? But apparently there's more than 7,600 because there's a lot of people doing this, and I'm always shocked and humbled by the kind words from the public. They're not all kind, but they're 95% kind of the public, of people who appreciate what I do, and my goal. Like, I'll just say this. My goal, my purpose is to help you do your purpose, right? I don't really want to clean and press comic books anymore. I've done 10,000 in my life and I've had it. I don't want to do it unless there's a special thing for friends. I don't charge any money to do it. The only thing I like to do is make stuff to help artisans, craftsmen like yourselves, conservators like yourself, who have knowledge, and you're sharing the knowledge. This is Kismet. It's a perfect marriage. You guys are spreading the knowledge, and I'm helping with the tools and materials. I think that this is just it's going to help us so much.
And so there's actually quite a bit I want to talk to about this as we wrap up your origin story here. This was the last slide, so I think we'll go just to our view and sort of wrap up and touch on some of those points. Go ahead, Shelby.
I was just going to answer Ben Stewart's question real quick. The very last story in the book is about the ImmacuWasher.
Sure.
Rick and I had a long discussion on the ImmacuWasher because I think it's an amazing product. I don't have the space necessarily in my little work area to set something up. But this goes into the chemical understanding of why this works. And Rick and I went into a deep discussion. So it talks about Flick's law and laminar flow and how and why it works, about the boundary layer theory, corrective mass transfer, and all of that in the book. So it's a nice 2-pager. Because I think that would end up being a little bit of a substantial discussion, simply because there's a lot of science behind how this works.
Sure.
It is in our book. And yes. Anyway, go ahead though.
You can
discuss it. You can still discuss it if you want to. I just want to put that out.
Yeah, I was going to get to that. But the top level summary is, the washer works better than a bath for the same reason the shower works better than a bath when you're washing your body.
Yeah,
you don't have to understand the science more than that, right? But I wanted to touch on a couple things. So firstly, Rick, ImmacuClean and your background. I really appreciate you sharing the origin story and the background, because without that information, people may just think, you took some surfactant, you put it in a bottle, you put your own label on it. So, you're trying to make some money off some people, but you're a bona fide scientist working in this field, trained with years of experience, and you spent a lot of time developing this product. One of the reasons why we included it in the book as a preferred method to deal with certain kinds of soiling and grime, despite the fact that the conservation literature is generally against the use of surfactants, is because you helped us understand that it is specifically formulated for a very narrow range of hydrophobic contaminants. And if we're going to use anything on comics, it's probably the thing to use. So it is among a very short list of surfactants that we felt comfortable
Right.
recommending in the book because
Yes.
of the science behind it. And I'll use that as a segue to another important point that some of the viewers have brought up and that you brought up. And that is this whole idea of gatekeeping and keeping secrets and keeping things proprietary and not sharing. And you and I have talked about this. We both come from the world of intellectual property, Shelby as well. You know, I have a few dozen patents. You do. I have in my work, I've had to keep trade secrets. I've done all kinds, you know, I understand the value of that and the importance of it. I get it. Also though, there's the world of science in which, you know, public access is the main way in which we disseminate information, and peer review process is the main way by which we improve our knowledge in science. And so for many of us working in this field, there's a very clear understanding of things that we put into the public domain, things that we keep, that we patent, which is technically in the public domain, but we have exclusive use of, and things that we keep trade secret or proprietary, right? And so you've invested a lot of time in the formula for MacuClean. Obviously, you would keep that as a trade secret. That would be proprietary information. But how it's used, why it's used, how it's formulated, what the science behind it is, to put that in the public domain, to let conservators and hobbyists use that information to make their own educated decision and to do their own experiments, to do their own testing, to advise how they use it and to inform how they use it, is exactly how I think we ought to be moving this hobby forward. So as you said, you know, it's kismet, it's a match made in heaven. It really is a perfect alignment of our view of how this sort of thing ought to be done. To the extent that somebody puts a lot of work and energy into something, they ought to reap the benefits of that. And it shouldn't be that it becomes a public domain element the next day. On the other hand, we are very much against gatekeeping. We're very much against judging who gets to do these things and who gets access to things. We're for democratizing this hobby, democratizing conservation in general, and or comic books in general, but conservation specifically of comic books. So I just wanted to kind of get all that out there. And I think there's maybe a few other, I'll do a few more shout outs and answer.
Well, I'm going to let's answer a few questions real quick. So one was, how much are the drawing boards? So Rick has, of course, a channel, ImmaculateComics.com, where you can shop everything. The drawing boards, I must just skip the page. I think they're around $30 or $40, Rick.
Something like
if
that.
I remember right.
2 sheets of remade paper and 4 like standoffs, and then 2 pieces of 11 by 17 acrylic.
Yeah. So there's a couple of different. I'm trying to see. Is this the drawing?
We should just say check out Immaculate Comics.
Yeah, Immaculate. Yeah,
we don't need to price
and check your maybe check your website, Rick, because maybe I'm just missing it. You do have them broken up now for the humidity chamber kit prototype and the spine supporter. It's only $9. Also blue light array. There's a lot of great products over there. So ImmaculateComics.com.
I put a link in the description as well.
Oh, thank you.
I started just one quick thing is today I started building a kit for people because someone asked me. Everything's because someone asked me, a kit that's for tanning removal kit. So I've got little centrifuge tubes with exact amount of calcium hydroxide and a tripore beaker with a line on it that says, here's how you pour it in. Some people want that, right?
Yeah.
And everything else they need, they just wants to buy a bag of stuff and just do it. Then you don't have to think about it. No, you don't have to get a scupula. You don't need a balance. You just put it in and you're just done. And that's what he wanted. So I started building that today as well.
Awesome. Okay. So I'm going to do shout outs here.
Yeah, Rick, check your store because I do not see the drawing kit.
Welcome
but I may be missing it. Double check. John.
Welcome to John Scamardo.
So we did have a question, and I know we want to really get into it. ImmacuClean versus ComicUClean. They're 2 different products for 2 different uses. And Yeah, ImmacuClean, we go into some very good details in the book about.
Welcome to Maurice Devereaux. Welcome to James
Oh.
Medler.
Maurice is a good friend of mine.
Gerald Yates, David Clark. David Clark, that was issue number 1 of JLA.
Yep.
Welcome to, I think we had one other person I didn't call out earlier. BJ Count.
BJ
Gorilla
Count.
Products.
And he asked, what's the pH of ImmacuClean? I believe it's pH neutral, isn't it?
Almost. It's like 7.6.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
So it's
actually,
a
the
little bit
question
more
was,
alkaline side.
the question was, what is the pH if you solubilize it in calcium hydroxide, which obviously would depend on how much calcium hydroxide you're using. So I think that's essentially adjustable.
It is.
That'd be
So
for
this
your
was,
testing.
yeah, according to Peter's testing, this is around an 8 to a 9 when we do a 1/4 supersaturated solution with distilled water, and then mixing in this, you should get roughly the same. It should be around 8 to 8.5, I would think. Just doing quick math in my head. So you're going to be on the alkaline side, so you'll be really safe. There's no acids, if that's what you're concerned about, that actually like eat dirt away or eat grease away or something like
No,
that.
I think we're smarter than that.
We are.
Something like that. Yeah.
So before we go to segment 2, Rick and I share another passion for original Swiss movement watches.
Oh yeah.
And we agreed to wear something each that we were going to show off. So I'm going to feature mine real quick here. This is an Omega Seamaster.
That is.
And it's a vintage about 1974. So not quite as old as me. This is, some collectors call this the Anakin, the Anakin Skywalker. There's a sister watch to this. It's all murdered out that they called the Darth Vader. This is a manual chronograph with the 168 movement, which is the movement that went to the moon.
Yeah, the original Speedmaster movement. Oh, we lost Paul?
Did we?
Well, I'll show
I'm
mine.
here. I just instead of minimizing myself, took myself out of the stream. And then Rick, you were going to show off your daily wear for today as well.
I should have brought my my Speedmaster. It's in the other room, but I have a right now I have a Planet Ocean.
Oh, beautiful.
Seamaster. So we're both Seamastering it, right?
Yeah, this is like the James Bond Seamaster, yes?
No, that one's blue actually, but
Oh, okay.
this was yeah, there is one. This is the Planet Ocean one.
Oh, cool.
That's
see, my knowledge of the newer watches is
yeah,
thin.
it's my Speedmaster is my favorite.
Yeah, you have a vintage Speedy, yeah.
Yeah, it's you know, what do you say? That's the watch. If you know 2 watches, you know the Rolex, like the Oyster, and if you know 1, if you know 2, it's the Speedmaster.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
So we share that passion as well.
I don't collect watches, but I even know those. And there's a really cool channel of a guy that actually does restoration of those.
Marshall Sutcliffe. I actually know him. I have a picture. I should share it of he and I going, what, this thing?
Oh, really?
Yeah. He's well known in the Magic community. And when I used to do the Grand Prix tour in Magic the Gathering, I would always say hi to him, and we'd always get a picture together going like this.
How cool.
Yeah. It's, I mean, if you're nerds like us, I mean, I love watching those
His channel is blown up. It's up. I mean, he's got videos with millions of views.
Oh yeah, it's amazing.
Marshall Sutcliffe, he's great.
If you were a Speedmaster in Switzerland, you can't get through any train you can't go anywhere without someone stopping to show you their watch if they recognize yours.
Yeah, it's pretty.
You can't walk 100 meters outside without someone wanting to look at it.
So we're going to transition to an update on the book. And I think BJ Count had this question that I'm not sure I think you attempted to answer, Shelby, but I'm not sure we did. So let's do the book.
I wasn't sure how deep you wanted to get into that, but yes.
I think he says the Legends. I think what he means is the deluxe edition. So if you're a Kickstarter backer at the deluxe edition level, those are not available through Amazon, is the short answer. The longer answer is you'll be notified through the Kickstarter the exact sort of details of how that gets delivered.
Exactly.
Go ahead, Shelby.
All right. So y'all know I love talking. I know I always interrupt Paul a lot, but yes, this is my chance. All right. So y'all know we've been doing the Kickstarter for about the past 30 days. We're coming down to the last 4 or 5 days. We really appreciate all the response. You know, I originally hoped that we might get 40 sales, and we just hit 150. And we just went over $12,000, and I couldn't be more excited, and how it really helps us out to be able to get this out there to y'all and be able to do a lot more things for you. Thank you to Kickstarter. Also, if they're listening, they backed us with a project that we love, which put us on the front page under the category of comics, and we couldn't be happier for the support and everything we've gotten from Kickstarter. Go ahead, Mr. Paul. Dr. Paul.
Yeah.
Reward levels. So several people have asked about that. We, with a great response, of course, any kind of digital rewards, everybody will get. As far as physical rewards, we have added more stretch goals, but I'm not going to tell you what they are because I want them to be a surprise. I decided, you know, I could put a number on it and say, hey, if we reach $10,000 or something like that. No, the response has been so great. Paul and I talked about it, and we're just going to give them out the physical extra stretch goal rewards as a surprise, free to everybody that purchased physical stuff. And I'll tell you that you will like the new stretch goals. The book will be out at Amazon in February for $60 and $80 for softcover, hardcover, respectively. However, purchasing through Kickstarter, you get a $10 discount, plus you get the exclusives that will not be available anywhere else. The deluxe hardcover is only available through Kickstarter. And I'm going to tell you that it's beautiful. It's going to be on thicker 80 to 100 pound glossy paper. The paper that's in the book now, Jack's sitting on my book, is around 60-pound paper. So this will be thicker, glossier paper.
By the way, it's still nice. It's the nicest paper at Amazon. It's the deluxe paper at Amazon in terms of like self-publication, but just not quite the level we wanted for the deluxe edition.
Exactly. So it's going to be beautiful. It's going to have a special binding and such. So yeah, it's going to be really nice. Limited quantities are still available. We actually sold out of the soft covers this weekend, and I went ahead and added 10 more soft covers, but I expect those to sell out pretty quickly too. So
the other thing worth noting is through the Kickstarter, you have the option of requesting inscriptions, getting signature copies, etc., which obviously won't be available through Amazon either. So
exactly.
And really, if you have any interest at all, if you're on the fence, you probably want to get the book through the Kickstarter, and there's a very limited time. There's just 5 days left. So
exactly. And we actually had requests for multiple copies. So you can do, and it's like an upsell, right? So when you purchase or you pledge, you will have an opportunity to add more copies if you want to at this discounted rate.
So you can get one to read and one to just bag and board and put in your collection.
Exactly. And that came about because we have had to add things to Japan, to the Netherlands, and people wanting multiple copies so they can actually sell over in those countries. So we couldn't be happier.
Absolutely.
All right. Updates. Woo!
We're in the end game, folks.
All right. As y'all know, we talked about this last time. Forward by Matt Nelson, president of CGC. We actually got that last week from him, and we would, one, as a friend of Matt's, Matt, if you see this, thank you. I know Paul says will say the same thing. He has spent a lot of time with us, been very generous. And I just couldn't say enough about how great he has been and supportive of this book.
Matt's been so gracious. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure was that the book actually goes almost like a companion book to Matt's grading book, where there's nothing in conflict with this book with CGC or their stance on anything. Everywhere where we could, we provided CGC's stance on different conservation techniques. And Matt took the time to read the entire book, give us feedback on all of those, and essentially just make sure that when we say, if you do this intervention, CGC will give you this grade designation, that we were correct. So those are basically all have Matt's approval. And, you know, again, in writing the foreword, he just kind of put his stamp on this book, and through his edits and his input into it. We couldn't be, again, more thankful and humbled, really, that he would take the time to pay attention to our little project. So thanks, Matt.
Exactly.
And I think it really made the book a lot better than it would have been otherwise, right? It's one thing.
To the next slide, we could continue that conversation. Go to the next slide. Okay, so really based on some input with Matt and such, we actually broke some things out to add clarity and added some things. So now we did have 12 chapters. Now we have 14 chapters, and there's 15 more pages. So the book originally was 250, and we're right around 266. And no extra money. I mean, this is money that's coming out of our pocket, so to speak, in terms of the extra printing costs and stuff. But we're not raising the price or anything for these added things. So I couldn't be happier. And it's the next slide, Paul. Secret Shift Code, already talked about that. There you go. We had a discussion with Matt Nelson. He actually, this is a quote from him in one of the emails. This is the Bible for comic book conservation. And I think that just says a lot about the work that Paul and I put in. And also Rick. Rick was one of the early people to see drafts of this and provide input. And then just follow on. And Paul, if you want to talk a little bit more about this, then Matt actually wanted to provide input in certain areas of the book. So you could think of it as straight from the mouth of CGC if you want, but what that stance was on conservation and grading. So go ahead, Paul, if you had a few more things to add.
Sure. Yeah. Well, just before getting to Matt, mentioning Rick, obviously the professor and our co-hosts here, Phil and Larry, Barry from the Comic Presser, a lot of folks in the hobby contributed to a really thorough read and feedback. And then a lot of folks contributed pictures too. One last thing I want to mention about contributions, all of the backers of the Kickstarter are really important contributors to the book. One of the other perks, if you like seeing your name in print, is that if you back the Kickstarter, your name is going to be in the book. So in the beginning of the book, we have a section where we thank everybody that supported us and contributed to the book in any way, which includes all the backers of the Kickstarter. So you know what? If you want to have your name in the book, back the Kickstarter at any level.
And you can see how good the book is because it is Jack approved because he's laying on top of it to sleep.
It doubles as a cat.
As a cat
bed, right? But regarding Matt, yeah, absolutely. It was really incredible to have Matt really basically come in as a collaborator and say, I want to make sure that this book is as useful as it could possibly be for hobbyists and conservators. And I want to make sure it aligns with our position on everything. And even, Matt's background is in conservation and restoration. So he even gave us some input on where we could make chapters better that had nothing to do really with CGC. Just said, back in the day, we used to do it this way. And, maybe you guys should mention that. So really couldn't be happier with where the book's at right now, and the fact that we're just here in the end game is really exciting.
Yep. And then lastly, and I don't think they're ready for this, but we had an interview. This is probably one of the biggest requests we had was, is Kenny going to be involved? We finally had an interview with Kenny Sanderson this past week, and there's a full page on his history, which he told us, he said probably about 30 people actually know his full history of how he got into conservation and his perspectives on conservation. So it was just a really great little conversation we had with him, and something that we're happy to include. Also, he sent us a lot of images. There's 5 pages of his work and techniques that have never been seen before. So if you want to know what Kenny Sanderson's full immersion leaf casting tank looks like, guess what? We got pictures of it. We got pictures of him putting pulp into the full immersion tank. We have pictures of him pulling, of what it looks like when it's pulled out, and just some amazing things that you can do with leaf casting that I had never seen before. So there's things on like double-sided leaf casting. There's full page leaf casting. I was just astonished. Paul, you got a few things on that?
Yeah, Kenny was just, again, really gracious in sharing with us. I touched on it before, proprietary methods and things that he's worked out that he hasn't made public, but really gave us sort of like the view behind the curtain at the Wizard's work, and asked us to share it with you. So we really expanded the section that we had sort of reserved for Kenny, because we had been talking to him for some time about having him in the book. And we expanded it because, he shared with us so graciously. And I think it's really a selling point of the book. And I think for many of you, it will be one of your favorite sections of the book. So super excited about that as well.
I agree. All right. So we talked about this last time, but what's next? Coming out near this summer is going to be our how-to guide. So this first book was always intended to be like a resource manual, but this is going to be more of a cookbook, a step-by-step how-to guide for comic book conservation. The first draft is now complete. I actually finished writing it a couple of days ago. It's over 140 pages. There's going to be all new artwork, a lot of information that it is more step-by-step versus, like I said, this being more of a resource manual. This is going to be actual step-by-step of every type of things that you see Paul and I or Rick do on our channels. So I couldn't be happier with this. It's going to be at a lot lower price. We're shooting for around $30 for the soft cover. So people that want to be more entry level, it can be affordable for you, because we do understand the large page count of the first book of this current book, and like I said, I've always been honest, we're only making about $10 a book on this, guys and gals. So, but we try to keep it affordable. Now, special just for y'all, here's the cover to the new book.
Shelby,
nicely done.
Beautiful as always. Yeah, we benchmarked a different audience. We'd benchmarked some other books in writing this one. As Shelby said, it's going to be about 60% of the total page count of the current book. The current book is, as you see, it's larger, phone book sized, and it really is. It has everything. But maybe there are folks that, there's a different audience for this one. It's a bit of a wider audience, I believe. So if we don't have as much content out at the end of 2024 and in 2025 as we did in 2023 and the beginning of 2024 on YouTube, please forgive us. We're creating content. It's just going in a different direction, folks.
Yes, but we've got a lot of things in the in process. So I hope y'all enjoy that special just for you guys and gals. And again, I can't say enough about how thrilled of everything
Yeah.
I've been
Yeah.
with it. With all
I'm
of this.
super excited to have these, you know, Shelby and I are going to have a little party where we're going to pack all these up and ship them out to the Kickstarter backers. I'm super excited to have them in your hands very soon and wrap up this Kickstarter and kind of move on. And to the, you know, we still have quite a bit of work to do, but move on from this process we've been in of writing and editing. So with that, let's say hi to a few more folks. Bronzeville's here. Welcome. Jeffrey Peterson's here. Jason Adrift has been cracking jokes as usual, but we've got a lot to cover. So I'm going to skip the dad jokes today. It is Guinness. Gorilla Products says, hello, Rick. John Scamardo says, what did I want to hit on? Oh, Gorilla Products says very excited to get the Kickstarter physically. And I thought I had one more that I wanted to read before we go to our last segment.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we can get all the contributors to sign or not. You know, I think Rick's signature is pretty expensive. So,
Unbothered Kitty says, beautiful. Friend of the channel. Let's see. Yeah, let's go to if you had a question that you think we should address and didn't, let me know. I think most of the comments are, you know, about shrinkage and Guinness and stuff like that, which I applaud, but we're almost at an hour and a half and we still have another segment to do. So I think we want to jump into that. So the last segment is a segment that Rick put together for us, which is kind of a tour de force of all of the things that he does at Immaculate Comics coming together in one project. And it's our thumbnail picture for this week's show. And I wanted you to just walk us through, we have videos here, walk us through everything that happened with this book because it went through an incredible transformation.
Yeah, that one was someone had bought that at a Goodwill in Woodville, Washington, and it was actually behind another book. So we got two books for $10, but there was some kind of Western comic book in the front of a really kind of a loose bag, and this was behind it. So he bought that one for $10, and behind it was this Superman #4, and it was really moldy to the point that the plastic was getting black on the inside of it. It had been taped. Tape had to be removed. The cover had to be removed and replaced. It had to be clean and whitened. And this guy asked me if I could do it. And he said, how much? I said, yeah, I don't charge for that. I'll do it for free. But it's going to be a monster. So what I decided to do was this bug was in my head. I said, I'm going to build one machine that does everything. I want one that does ozone chamber. I want it to be a washing machine, and I want it to be a light box for doing light exposure. I'm going to build all of it into one box, and it's going to be a transformer. You can pull a couple pins, and it works. It successfully worked, but it was such a pain to build, and I kept squirting water all over myself, and I had to have different switches on the floor to turn the lights on and the pump off and things with my feet. I said, yeah, I never want to see this thing again after that. But that was the impetus for this project. And if you want to see if you can go to the next video, the first slide, I'll show you what this video looks
so we're
like.
gonna go
this book
just a minute. Here we go.
So this is just me giving a tour of the book. You see how moldy it is, and it's the spine's out of shape, and it's tough. And I am wiping this. I'm trying to wipe with ImmacuClean actually, just to get the I have my hands on under, seeing how much mold comes off just by wiping, and it's a little bit. Right? It's not much of the mold comes off. These
are just the dried spores.
Yeah. So once it's dead, once you've killed it with ozone, it comes right off. It peels off of there. So that's the important part of this. Maybe you can show the next slide now. So here's initial. That's the initial wipe. Afterwards, after you kill it, it comes off like really easily once it's been exposed to ozones for about, I think we're like 30 hours or so. I meant 24, but I left it in an extra 6. So I'll show you what that is here. Maybe we can go to the next slide. I'm going to try to go faster and respect people's time here.
Yeah.
So this is it. So you've got a frit here. There's a pump. I have an oxygen tank and an ozone generator with a spark igniter thing that makes a spark and generates O3 from O2. That's what the book looks like. I'm sort of just demonstrating. They think this is actually when I pulled it out of there. So this is after I
it looks cleaner.
Yeah. So this was after, but this is demonstrating. This is the frit, and and you can see the mirror and the light array in the bottom. And there's a 2. So if you just take a quick notice here, there's 2 hinges on this board that point down. So it makes 2 legs that come down to support the book over the light. But it straightens out, becomes rigid, and becomes the backing board for the washer too.
Yep.
And so I had to have rubber grommets on all the electronics to go in and out of there, anything that carried more than 12 volts, because the drivers reduce it to 12 volts, but all the above 12 volts stuff had to be outside of this box. Okay. Yep. Sorry, go ahead and continue.
So here's the next video.
So I think this is demonstrating
the removal after coming out of the ozone.
Yeah, so I'm just wiping, and you can see this is not even a particularly dirty spot. Well, I guess there's not really much to clean off here, but I guess this isn't that great of a video. But there is one I have with it comes off black, that other swipe that you saw. I think I sent you the wrong video here.
Hold on.
All right, we'll continue. We'll just go off to the next one.
I'm working on it.
Sorry. I know, because I couldn't embed
I'm
them.
doing it. I'm actually proud of what I'm doing. Here we go. There's a lot of videos.
So now this is rigid, you see. So now I've got these pins in the side of the thing that make it sit flat instead of folding on there. And this is the demonstration. I'm just demonstrating here how this would sit with the light array underneath it, because I'm holding this like one-handed. So you'd have a light in the lid, and there's light underneath, and it's 24. So 24 watts on the bottom and 18 watts on the top to even out the power of the light. So I had to split it. And I'm just sort of demonstrating where I'm going to like punch all the holes and put the grommets in this particular box.
Yeah, and luckily you found a container here that has ridges there on the side, so you can set your plastic or acrylic sheet on top of.
Exactly, and the Craftsman ones work great for that. Okay, next slide, please. And here we are washing it. So this is the same backing board. So I'm washing this now here. I usually start low and work my way up on there just so I can get see how it's tracking. So now this is fresh solution. So it's got a hole with a valve coming out so that the solution doesn't build up and get to the level of the comic book. And there's a 5-gallon bucket going in and a 5-gallon bucket coming out. And I'm washing the stains off of this book after it's been ozone treated and cleaning it with, this is about a 0.1% AmaccuClean solution because it's slightly caustic. I didn't put any. I would use calcium carbonate. Calcium hydroxide works too, as an antacid they call it, because that is what an antacid is calcium carbonate. So this is just a demonstration. When I first put this video on Instagram, at least my wife did, people completely freaked out. Like, what are you doing? You can't just give a comic book a shower. I'm like, well, actually you can if you're careful. It doesn't take huge coconut balls. You can just do it, right? You can just do it. And I built this device to help me with it, right? Okay, next video, please.
I mean, this actually seems mild compared to what we see Jerry the Jitterbug do.
Yeah, he'll give you anxiety attacks. And then the same container, and this is why I'm proud of it, because it's the same box. This is the same container now, and you can see the light traveling up the tube, from the ozone generator, and there I am. I'm exposing it to the light. It was about at 40 minutes, I believe, on this book.
Yeah, that's basically fiber optic there. Inadvertent fiber optic, right?
It's a EPR, right? Like a plasma resonance, right? Plasmon resonance. Yeah, and that's what I did. I thought this is going to be a great thing, and I'll make it, and people will buy them. I said, I don't want to make any more than one of these things. Into that. I still have it. It still works great. And this is the before and after what that cover looked like. And I skipped the part because it's pretty standard stuff, removing the tape. I rubbed some toluene on the back of it. I used a hot knife to peel it off, and I used solvent to remove the adhesive residue. And then luckily I didn't have to, because it had been taped for so long. I think just as a prophylactic, I didn't have to repair the cover to fix it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was split in several places. This book's never going to win a beauty contest, but it looks better than it did.
Yeah, and it can be put in a collection now, right? Like before, it had to be quarantined.
Yeah, it was
frankly,
awful. I had to
right?
wear
It was a health hazard. It was a health hazard when you received it, right?
It was awful. It was awful. It smelled really bad. In fact, many of the pages were stuck together with mold. Like you couldn't read.
Wow.
It was basically like a King's Table buffet for mold in there. It was just working the way through it. And next, I just have some before and after photos as well of different sections of it. This is like one bottom left section, close up, because some people ask for close up so you can see.
Yeah, that's incredible.
The difference here.
So you did you do a full bath on the cover in Halloween?
I did wash it in Toluene. It wasn't quite a full bath. I just kind of sprayed it with there and then let it evaporate after that. I sprayed it and then dabbed it with Kim wipes. And then that surprising amount of stuff came out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Shocking actually. And then
but the inks were color fast. I mean, I really don't see any loss of ink with the Halloween there.
None. I mean, you can even look at the elm in Michigan. You can see the little bit of missing ink, but you see you see the same, below, right? So you can tell there is no missing ink whatsoever.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's incredible. But and I know Rick and I, have spoke in depth. This is the kind of whiteness from the AccuWasher. It's just so impressive. I got to get some space so I can.
Yeah, I'll send you one.
Maybe
make you a tiny one, a mini MacWasher, right?
Well, and I think you could probably do it with, over your sink or something like that. Unlike what you were talking about, where you got to have like 2 5-gallon buckets and stuff like that. I mean, so it does have a footprint to it, even though, but that's mainly because of the water, right?
Yeah.
The actual pieces, there's not a large footprint.
Well, if one of the buckets is your sink and the other half is the other half of your sink.
Exactly.
Yeah. This is mold. This is the mold before and after on this book. You can see how it's removed. And that is all thanks to the ozone treatment. Without the ozone, it would, that stuff is a miracle for getting mold to just die and fall off of a book. It even smells kind of like, I call it fire and brimstone, but it smells like ozone for a good week afterwards, because that stuff is just actively killing. And nothing that lives and reproduces can survive ozone for a day.
Well, I'll be frank. When we surveyed the conservation literature for mold removal techniques that are approved by, the different bodies that govern conservation, they were like, ozone's just too dangerous to use.
Yeah, it's not. Okay. Look, there's a lot of things I know and do that I don't sell. Notice I don't sell an ozone generator.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not on that list. I don't do it, and that's the reason why. You can't get anywhere near that stuff safely.
It's a serious health hazard. We have alternative methods in the book.
We do. In the book, we have a section on mold removal, and we provide some alternative methods. But like I always say, your best way to deal with mold is don't buy moldy books.
Sure. But when you come across Superman 4 for $10,
I for $10, I agree with you. Yeah.
You find a way.
Yeah, and this is just I just wanted to say it's slightly caustic. It's just a little over 7, depending on the concentration.
Well, we recommend people buffer paper to a little over 8, between 8 and 8.5. Conservation literature is pretty clear that that's actually where you want to leave paper with an alkaline reserve. So that certainly wouldn't be a concern for any conservators or for this long-term safety of the book. That said, I think you definitely, I'm sure you agree, Rick, you definitely want to rinse and AccuClean out.
That's exactly what
we would ultimately do a rinse with a calcium.
Rinse with calcium hydroxide.
Right.
Or calcium
Yeah.
carbonate is fine.
Yeah.
Calcium carbonate is not as
Soluble.
Yeah, it's like-
soluble.
it's like
Thank you.
washing with
And-
chalk.
and
Yes.
it is like washing with chalk, and you
Yeah.
could have some residue build up. And if you watch a couple of Jerry's videos where he uses it, you know, he talks about that white residue buildup that he gets, and he has to wipe down the book and stuff afterwards.
Yeah, I always wash it with water and I don't use it much. I'm talking my normal calcium hydroxide is about 1.25, 1.3 grams per 900 milliliters because Triport beaker is exactly 1,000. I don't want to spill it. So
Oh,
it's under
that's
900
almost
milliliters.
full. That's almost full saturation. Full
Yeah.
saturation is 1.6 calcium, 1.6 grams per liter. For
Yeah, it
calcium
takes a long
hydroxide.
time to go into solution at that. You know, it's not, and there's always a little bit of residue at the bottom of the container.
Yeah, we're usually
No,
using
no, no.
it.
Yeah.
We make our solutions at that level, but we usually use it at 1 to 5 to 1 to 3 dilutions. So we're using it at somewhere between 1/5 and 1/3 or 20 to 33% saturated. And again, we go through all the details of that in the book. For
Yeah.
those of you or,
And in
you know,
videos, I mean, where we show that we make a big jug, glass jug, use glass, not plastics. There can be some issues with that. You decant it, you know, as you move, and you end up with a crystal clear solution that has none of what Rick is talking about with the floaties at the bottom, because you're going to fill that back up with water and create you a new jug, right? And you can constantly have your supply of calcium hydroxide that's completely crystal clear, decanted, no haze. It's actually kind of beautiful.
it is. So let's wrap up with a couple of questions. And I do want to say, actually, before I jump into that one, let's go with thanks Salesboy again for joining the show. Salesboy is the sponsor of this show. If you're watching it ad-free live, it's because of his super chat. So give him a thanks. Fierce Rabbit, we would never chase with DI water. DI water is has no ions. And what that'll actually do is strip beneficial ions from the paper and actually weaken the paper and give it less permanence over time. But I'll let Rick answer the first sort of half of this question of how he would manage this.
Yeah,
how he
it's
does
okay to recirculate the material, and as long as you do like a rinse afterwards. And if a rinse, I have a lot of DI water in there, but I usually sprinkle a little bit of regular old sodium chloride table salt in it if I'm going to use it. It's just a pinch. Now that stuff's like 57.5 molar, so I use like a 10th molar. It's like 5.7 grams per liter. There's a little sprinkle of anything with an ion in it that's chlorine is like not the ideal. You should probably use sodium sulfate actually, but at that amount it's not harmful. But yeah, you can recirculate the same solution. I didn't in this case because it was so much tanning and so much mold that I didn't want that stuff coming back around and redepositing on the book. It is okay normally to use it, recirculate, dump it out, and then put a little bit of, I don't know what you guys use as a what do they call it, Le Chatelier buffer in there to keep it from stripping further ions. I use sodium chloride because it's handy, or SDS, sodium disulfate.
I mix up the saturated calcium hydroxide solution, and I just use it universally for everything. I mix that diluted with, it's very rare that I use hydrogen peroxide, but when I do, I use that diluted for hydrogen peroxide. I use that diluted for any surfactant that I'm going to use, including whether we're using Triton X100 or we're using ImmacuClean. I'm pretty much using that for everything. And when you read the conservation literature and you look at the science that's been done behind the different alternatives, because obviously there are a lot of salts that could be used, a lot of sort of alkaline salts that could have been used. Almost all the research points back to there's a very good reason why calcium hydroxide is the standard for all paper conservationists worldwide. And that's actually been something, it goes back literally hundreds of years where they didn't understand why, but there were certain villages that were put on streams where they had a paper mill. And that
Yeah.
stream came from a seepage from a mountain that had limestone stone. And so that was basically
Well, even
calcium.
soaps, right? Like there were certain streams that were better to wash clothes, and it happened to be streams that had limestone.
Yeah.
And
So-
that's literally what calcium hydroxide is lime water sometimes.
Exactly. So I just use it universally for everything. And,
Yeah.
you know, I always have a saturated jug of it on the back counter, and I just
Exactly. So
You
a
can
couple of
buy
quick,
them.
a couple of
Dilute it.
quick responses with water. So Paul has mentioned several times he has well water, which is highly. I'm just going to say highly alkaline. It may be lime from limestone or not.
it is.
I have city water. It has chlorine in it. It has copper in it.
It has lead.
I do not, and lead, I do not use my tap water because it has those chemicals. I use distilled water, but I do not use pure distilled water, like Paul said, because of the it is basically it's deionized, meaning there's no ions, so it's going to leach other things from it, right? It's just the way science works with things trying to move to a state of homeostasis. But what I do is I add the supersaturated calcium hydroxide to my solutions, all of distilled water always. I don't know about spring water or anything. I've never stuck it under used a pH or anything like that. But I do know what my city water has in it, and I would never. Actually, I have used it on books, and I regretted it.
Yeah. In the Texas Hill Country, our aquifers are all through limestone. So, all the well water out here, and even the tap water for a lot of the suburbs here is actually a good basic water, not too bad. Ozone help with foxing. We have a whole section in the book on foxing. Origins of foxing are not actually super well known. There's a lot of.
But it's an interesting history of people not understanding what foxing is.
Sure.
That's why we included it. So
you have any thoughts on this, Rick?
Yeah, it does not help.
So the answer is no. Okay, we can move on. Good one, Ben.
But EDTA does.
I think we've already talked about this, Don. And let's see.
Yeah, that's a weird
dioxide, diluted peroxide mixture for blood treatment. At the end of the day, I have found no reason to ever use anything beyond 0.5% hydrogen peroxide in conjunction with blue LEDs. Are there other things that work? Sure. Are there reasons you should look elsewhere? I'm not so sure of that, because hydrogen peroxide breaks down into oxygen and water, and you're using it at such a low concentration. There's very good science that there's literally no change in the paper at the molecular level, like not even an increase in small chain in average molecular weight of cellulose chain. So it's safe, it's effective.
Yeah.
Why would I do anything else? And there's a whole bunch of evidence in the scientific literature to support it.
And Rick, I think through your visual inspections, you found diminishing returns at concentrations above 0.5% to 1% to 1.5%.
Yeah, it doesn't pay off. I've done the treatments, and then I've scanned my paper with an IR to get watch the carbon-carbon and the carbon-oxygen, the carbonyl bonds. And you can see them break as you get up closer to like 3% and 6%. There's a notable diminishing, and I think it's the van der Waals layers in the cellulose. It's not the the glucose part. It's the ones that the sheets this way, right?
Yeah.
So you can see it go, and I've used them this way before. Sometimes people ask me to. I kind of explain them the stuff. They say I want the best, but I always say, look, best is not. There's no best. but you can go up to 3%, and it takes a lot of percent to work a little better, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
visibly. So you can put 6% in, it works a little better, but it's a little better than 0.5%. So,
Yep.
but it's a lot more dangerous. So I mean,
yeah, 10 times more dangerous, 20% more effective. Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
you would
like
think
the
better.
diminishing returns, and we actually talk about that. It actually causes almost a delamination process versus a fiber breakdown process.
So just again, it's all in the book, but rule of thumb: full aqueous submersion, never more than 0.5% hydrogen peroxide. If you are
Yeah.
spraying, so you're adding
and-
sort of a minimum total volume, you can go up to 1.5% pretty safely, but there's way less evidence and not as many scientific papers on that. So that's sort of like we feel confident that's safe, but there's not the same sort of peer-reviewed literature that there is for submersion. For full submersion, again, there's no benefit and a lot more risk to going higher than 0.5%. So
yeah. And Maurice Devereaux, yes, that's actually what they dilute hydrogen peroxide with when you buy it is distilled water. If you look at the ingredient label.
Yeah, but then you wouldn't want to use it directly on your book. You would
no. And so what I do is and again, a brown bottle with a locking tab because it is photosensitive and it's I'm gonna say air sensitive, but I know that's not the correct scientific term for it.
You want airtight and also light tight.
Yeah, and so what I do is whatever, and I buy 3% hydrogen peroxide, and if I put 100 milliliters, then I add 300 milliliters of distilled water. You can put a little bit of calcium hydroxide in it, but, and that's actually discussed in the book too, you do have a chemical reaction between hydrogen peroxide and calcium hydroxide, and it will produce a little bit of cloudiness because it's breaking down the oxygen-hydrogen bonds to leave calcium. I actually have a video that shows
that's
that.
actually how I use it universally.
Yeah, and it's fine. You just may have a little bit of that white residue sometimes, and you're always going to want to do a rinse anyway. So
yeah, I mean, I've never seen the white residue on the book.
No, I haven't.
The solution can cloud, but I don't see a residue
solution
on the book. You know, the book ends up that calcium hydroxide reacts with carbon dioxide in the air, and you end up with calcium carbonate in the book, which is invisible. So at least at those concentrations.
Which goes back to what Rick talked about that he uses mostly anyway is calcium carbonate. So it's all the same.
Yeah.
You're just moving ions, right? Moving some hydrogen and oxygen around.
Fierce Rabbit is a great question, and it's great that we have Rick here on the show. So we also talk about this in the book, but I'll give you the short story. I actually buy the LED arrays directly from Immaculate Comics from Rick. He sells 2 different wavelengths. He sells a 460 and a 420. My personal preference is the 460, which is lower energy, and it takes a little bit longer, but I have a little better control over it and it's less intense, and I prefer that. I'm a hobbyist. If I were a professional and I really had my exact times dialed in and I didn't have the luxury of sort of doing it at hobby scale, I might opt for the 420. I also wanted to answer this one. Welcome to the show, Survive Infinity 0088. It is okay to use distilled water for your humidity and for your humidity chamber, but it's actually kind of a waste of money because you just don't. It doesn't need to be distilled.
Yeah, I will use my bad city water for humidification, and that's simply because those things that I talked about that are bad aren't. They
don't go into vapor phase.
Yeah, it's not going to a vapor phase. Thank you.
So we cover that in the book too. That's a major myth that's out there, that you must use distilled water for humidity chamber. You don't. It's a waste of your money. It doesn't hurt anything, but it is a waste of your money. Hey, welcome to the show, Randall.
Yeah, welcome.
Great to have you here.
So Jason, okay.
Larry already built it, but I don't think he's interested in commercializing it. Maybe he'll send the plans to Rick and Rick will commercialize it.
There is
But-
We'll
one.
see if we can put that collaboration together.
You can do it with
But
you
as
put
we've talked-
chopsticks between the pages like this, and you want to get all the and you have to do lights on the sides.
Oh, no, you have to see. Have you seen Larry's?
No, I haven't, but he
Oh
sent
my
me a
gosh.
drawing of it
Yeah, it's
with his stacks.
that was
of-
one of the things that put Larry on the map for me when he first launched his channel. I was like, this cat, he just rolled up his sleeves and built some stuff,
It's after my own heart.
Yeah,
How
absolutely.
can I love him any more than that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to make a lot of stuff. I do a lot less of it now. My job is just now managing people instead of making stuff. But it is.
I'll
what
just
it is.
say, I'll give you the 15-second reply on that one is that it is most books are more tanned towards the edges than the middle,
Yeah.
in my
Mhm.
opinion. So I went to Panda Express and got a bunch of chopsticks and pulled them apart. And if you put a book and you can arrange the chopsticks in a way that separates them so that the edges are more exposed to light than the centers, because the centers are going to be dark. And if
Mhm.
you get lights on the side of the box as well, you can do the whole book at once. It's not pretty. It's not pretty.
And
Right.
Rick's blue LED box is mirrored on all sides, so you'll get that dispersion of the
Green,
light
yeah.
across all edges. Also, and we've talked about this in the past too, there's no need to like flip pages when you're blue LED because the light will absorb through the entire.
In fact, you might want to do it the other way around.
Yeah, exactly.
I
Exactly.
often do that. Yeah. If I disassemble a book and I want to whiten a cover, most of the time I will expose the interior of the cover
Interior.
to the blue LED, and that has enough of a photo bleaching effect that I get the effect that I want on the exterior of the cover. in
Especially in
doing
the lights, because
Exactly.
the lights are more transparent to the blue than the colored
it.
part.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Well, guys, I think we should wrap up there. This has been incredible to have you, Rick. I really appreciate it. It's been a long time coming. We're all big fans of everything
Yeah, I
you
love
do and your channel. And
I
we're
have
gonna
the
be
biggest.
You do
we're gonna
have
be doing-
biggest. You
We're
scored.
going to be
that one.
doing more collaborations in the future. I want to thank everybody that joined today. Please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And until next time, take care of one another.
Wait, do your thing, Shelby.
All right. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please be, like Paul said, take care of one another, but also remember, peace, love, and comics. Bye, y'all.
All right. Bye, guys. Wet papers.